Anxiety is one of the most persistent shadows that follows the human spirit. It moves quietly through the corridors of thought and emotion, sometimes subtle as a whisper, sometimes overwhelming as a storm. It is the unease that appears before decisions, the unrest that accompanies uncertainty, the tremor that rises when imagination outruns reason. Every human being knows this territory, even if they describe it with different words. To understand anxiety, we must recognize that it is not a modern invention. Long before psychology gave it a name, long before medicine attempted to classify it, anxiety was already woven into the experience of being human. Ancient farmers felt it in times of drought, travelers felt it when crossing distant lands, parents felt it while watching over their children. Even sages, philosophers, and prophets carried their own silent worries. Anxiety is not new. What is new is our expectation that life should be free from it. The dilemma is rooted in the structure of the mind itself. Human beings possess the extraordinary ability to imagine. We can anticipate the future, project possibilities, and reflect upon past events. This capacity allows for planning, creativity, and wisdom, but the same power can also betray us. When imagination becomes untethered from reason, it creates scenarios that do not exist, dangers that have not materialized, and threats that overwhelm the present moment. Anxiety is born in that gap between imagination and reality. In the modern world, this gap has widened. Our minds are exposed to an endless stream of information, alerts, comparisons, and expectations. We know more about the troubles of the world than any generation before us. We carry the weight of global crises, economic uncertainty, personal responsibilities, and the constant pressure to succeed. The human nervous system, shaped by ancient rhythms, now faces a world of constant stimulation. The result is often a mind that trembles under the weight of possibilities, but anxiety is not only a reaction to external circumstances, it is also a reflection of inner conflict. We fear the unknown because we desire control. We fear failure because we desire significance. We fear loss because we desire permanence. The heart longs for stability, yet life itself moves in continual change. This tension between the desire for certainty and the reality of uncertainty forms the foundation of anxiety. Even more profoundly, anxiety reveals a spiritual longing. Human beings do not seek only safety, they seek meaning. Every anxious question is, at its core, a search for clarity. What will happen? Why does this matter? Am I prepared? What does this say about my place in the world? Anxiety arises when these questions remain unresolved, when the mind cannot reconcile its fears with its understanding of reality. Yet many people view anxiety as a personal defect, a weakness that should be hidden or denied. In truth, anxiety is a universal signal that the inner world needs attention. The problem is not the existence of anxiety, but our misunderstanding of it. Anxiety is a messenger, not an enemy. It points toward parts of our life that lack order, understanding, or harmony. It urges us to examine the structures of our thoughts, the patterns of our reactions, and the beliefs that shape our perception of the world. This is where the ancient dilemma becomes clear. Human beings possess reason, yet they often react without reasoning. They possess imagination, yet imagination often dominates reason. They possess a longing for meaning, yet they try to navigate life without understanding its deeper order. Anxiety arises not from one single cause, but from the imbalance of these faculties. The question, then, is how to restore balance. How can the mind reclaim its clarity when imagination overwhelms it? How can the heart regain calm when uncertainty surrounds it? How can the soul feel grounded in a world where circumstances shift without warning? Throughout history, thinkers and healers have offered countless explanations. Some claimed anxiety was merely physical, others saw it as moral weakness, still others treated it as spiritual deficiency. But few offered a perspective as complete, nuanced, and deeply human as Maimonides. Maimonides understood anxiety not as a punishment or flaw, but as a sign of misalignment within the soul. He observed the human being through three distinct lenses: the physician who understood the body, the philosopher who understood the mind, and the theologian who understood the soul. This unique combination allowed him to diagnose anxiety with an insight that resonates across centuries. He recognized that the mind has the power to create suffering independent of external events. Two people can face the same circumstance, yet one remains calm while the other collapses. The difference lies not in the world around them, but in the interpretation within them. Anxiety is the interpretation of possibility without the guidance of reason. But Maimonides also saw anxiety as a doorway to inner growth. When a person experiences fear, it reveals a space where understanding has not yet matured. When imagination dominates, it reveals a space where knowledge must be strengthened. When the heart becomes overwhelmed, it reveals a space where ethical habits must be cultivated. In this sense, anxiety becomes the invitation to transformation. To understand this transformation, one must look beyond technique. The cure is not immediate. It is not found in impulsive reassurance or emotional escape. It is found in the gradual cultivation of wisdom, discipline, clarity, and purpose. The human being must learn how to balance thought and emotion, how to guide the imagination rather than be ruled by it, how to walk the path of moderation in every dimension of life. This is the essence of the human dilemma. We are born with faculties capable of greatness, yet those same faculties can generate suffering when misaligned. The mind becomes both the source of wisdom and the source of fear. The imagination becomes both the catalyst for creativity and the creator of illusions. The heart becomes both the seat of courage and the dwelling place of trembling. The question is not whether anxiety will appear, it is whether we will understand what it is asking of us. Maimonides' teachings offer a lens through which we can finally see anxiety clearly, not as chaos, but as signal, not as condemnation, but as guidance, not as disorder, but as the soul's call for alignment. And so the human dilemma stands. How can we elevate the mind, calm the heart, and situate the soul within the harmony it was created to seek? This is the beginning of the journey. To understand anxiety through the eyes of Maimonides is to enter a world where philosophy, medicine, ethics, and theology converge into a single lens. Maimonides did not view the human being as a fragmented creature. For him, body, mind, and soul formed one unified system. Any disturbance in one dimension inevitably echoed through the others. Anxiety, therefore, was never merely emotional. It was an expression of imbalance across the entirety of the human structure. In the Guide for the Perplexed, Maimonides explores the power and danger of the imagination. He explains that the imagination is essential for daily life, providing the mind with images, memories, and possibilities. It allows us to anticipate future events, solve problems, and envision outcomes. Yet because it operates through images rather than logic, it is vulnerable to distortion. When imagination grows too strong, reason loses its authority, fear expands beyond reality, possibility becomes certainty, the mind becomes ensnared in illusions it has created. This, according to Maimonides, is one of the root mechanisms of anxiety. He argues that the imagination often projects worst-case scenarios not because they are likely, but because the untrained mind gravitates toward extremes. If imagination is not held in check by reason, it becomes a relentless producer of fear. To restore calm, reason must reclaim its rightful position as the guide of the imagination. In the 8 chapters, Maimonides lays out the architecture of the soul. He identifies various faculties: the rational faculty, the appetitive faculty, the imaginative faculty, the vital faculty, and the sensory faculty. Each plays a role in shaping emotion and behavior. When one faculty dominates disproportionately, the soul becomes imbalanced. Anxiety emerges when the imaginative faculty overwhelms the rational one, or when the appetitive faculty exaggerates threats to its desires. Thus, for Maimonides, anxiety is not a flaw in character, but a misalignment in the internal hierarchy of the soul. In Mishneh Torah, particularly in the laws of character traits, Maimonides outlines the principle of the golden mean. Every virtue exists between two extremes. Courage exists between cowardice and recklessness. Generosity exists between miserliness and extravagance. Calm exists between indifference and panic. The middle path is the path of emotional health. Anxiety takes hold when the soul veers toward one of the extremes. This framework is essential for understanding Maimonides' approach. He believed that emotional health could be cultivated with the same discipline used to cultivate physical health. Just as one strengthens the body through consistent exercise, one strengthens the soul through consistent moderation. Emotional habits form through repeated practice. The anxious mind becomes calmer not through sudden insight, but through deliberate training. But Maimonides did not treat anxiety only through intellectual frameworks. As a physician, he observed how deeply the physical body influences emotional states. In his medical writings, he describes how poor digestion, irregular sleep, physical exhaustion, and overstimulation weaken the mind's resilience. A weakened body amplifies the intensity of fear. A strengthened body supports clarity and calm. He saw emotional suffering as a systemic issue, not a purely mental one. The physician in him offered remedies such as balanced nutrition, gentle movement, sufficient rest, and avoidance of overstimulation. These were not merely physical prescriptions. They were part of restoring harmony to the human being as a whole. Yet the philosopher in him went deeper still. Maimonides recognized that some forms of anxiety arise from the limitations of human understanding. The world is vast. Life is unpredictable. The future is unknown. Human beings fear what they cannot explain. They fear what they cannot predict. They fear their own vulnerability. Ignorance intensifies fear, and knowledge reduces it. In this sense, Maimonides saw the pursuit of knowledge as an antidote to anxiety. He did not mean knowledge in the abstract, but understanding of how the world operates. He believed that many fears dissolve when the mind gains clarity. When people misunderstand reality, they attribute events to randomness or malice. When they understand the structure of nature, they see that many outcomes are governed by laws, probabilities, and causes. The unknown becomes less threatening when illuminated by understanding, but the theologian in him took the final step. In the Guide for the Perplexed, Maimonides teaches that the universe is structured according to divine wisdom. Everything that exists follows a coherent, ordered system. Human beings may not grasp the entirety of this order, but they can perceive its outlines. For Maimonides, faith is not blind acceptance, but intellectual alignment with the structure of reality. Anxiety intensifies when the mind believes it stands alone against chaos. It diminishes when the soul understands that existence itself is guided by order, even when that order is hidden. This is why Maimonides insisted that the highest form of faith is knowledge. The more one understands the world, the more one understands the Creator's wisdom. This understanding produces a sense of grounding that anxiety cannot easily penetrate. Maimonides also addressed a profound dimension of anxiety, the fear of personal failure. He observed that people often judge themselves harshly, exaggerating their flaws and minimizing their strengths. They become anxious not only about events, but about their own perceived inadequacy. For this, he prescribes a path of ethical self-cultivation. When a person acts with integrity, moderation, and purpose, they build inner strength. Ethical living stabilizes the soul. He believed that a person committed to virtue gains confidence not from ego, but from alignment with truth. This confidence counteracts the self-doubt that fuels anxiety. Maimonides' approach to anxiety is therefore multifaceted. It integrates philosophy, psychology, ethics, medicine, and theology into a unified practice. For him, anxiety is not conquered through emotion alone. It is reduced through understanding, balanced through ethical discipline, supported through physical health, and illuminated through spiritual insight. This holistic view is what makes his teaching so enduring. It speaks to the full complexity of the human experience. It recognizes the dignity of the anxious person. It offers a path forward that does not rely on escapism, but on elevating the human being to a state of inner harmony. Maimonides did not promise that anxiety would disappear. He promised that the human being could rise above it. This is the heart of his perspective. To understand the spiritual dimension of Maimonides' teachings on anxiety, one must first understand the unity he saw at the core of all existence. For Maimonides, the universe is neither chaotic nor arbitrary. It is structured, ordered, coherent. Every element, from the movement of the stars to the beating of a human heart, operates within a framework of divine wisdom. Anxiety arises when the human mind loses sight of this order, when it becomes entangled in its own fragmented perceptions. Thus, the spiritual cure Maimonides proposes is not an escape from intellect, but its elevation. It is the harmonization of reason and faith, understanding and devotion, clarity and reverence. The bridge between these is neither blind belief nor detached rationalism. It is a profound contemplation that allows the human being to see unity where previously it saw only separation. Maimonides teaches that the first step in this spiritual synthesis is the mastery of perception. Anxiety thrives in distortion. It multiplies in the shadows of misunderstood events and imagined dangers. When reason perceives the world accurately, the soul regains equilibrium. This is why Maimonides places such emphasis on knowledge. For him, knowledge is not mere information, but the illumination of reality. When the mind sees clearly, fear loses its foundation. The second step is recognizing the proportionality of existence. Human beings often magnify their fears until they overshadow all else. They imagine calamities unfolding in every direction. They interpret uncertainty as threat and possibility as danger. Maimonides calls the mind back to proportion. In the vastness of creation, the individual fear is often overstated. Contemplation of the natural world helps the soul regain perspective. The order of the heavens, the cycles of nature, the precision of the physical universe all remind the mind that existence is not governed by chaos. This contemplation is not passive but transformative. It elevates the intellect, drawing it closer to the ultimate source of order. For Maimonides, this is a spiritual act. To study nature is to approach the Creator. To understand the structure of reality is to sense the unity behind it. As the soul rises toward this comprehension, anxiety diminishes. Fear cannot dominate in the presence of clarity. The third step in the synthesis is intellectual humility. This is one of Maimonides' most profound contributions. He teaches that human anxiety intensifies when the mind believes it must control everything. When people assume responsibility for predicting all outcomes, they collapse under the weight of impossibility. Maimonides invites the soul into a more truthful posture, acceptance of human limitation. For him, humility is not defeat, but alignment with reality. The human being is not meant to know everything. Uncertainty is woven into the very fabric of existence. To rebel against this is to battle the nature of reality itself, but to accept it is to find peace. The mind is liberated when it no longer demands omniscience. The soul becomes lighter when it no longer insists on absolute control. Anxiety loosens its grip as humility expands. The fourth step is ethical refinement. Maimonides teaches that emotional disturbances are not only cognitive but also ethical. A life filled with excess, impulsiveness, dishonesty, or imbalance creates inner turmoil. The soul becomes unstable. In contrast, a life grounded in virtue brings harmony. Patience stabilizes the heart. Honesty clears the mind. Moderation protects the soul. Ethical living creates an environment in which anxiety cannot easily take root. This is why Maimonides insists that an anxious mind must examine not only its thoughts, but its habits. Virtue is not merely moral excellence, it is inner equilibrium. A person aligned with ethical principles becomes less vulnerable to emotional storms. The soul, anchored in integrity, stands firm, even when external circumstances shift. The fifth step in the synthesis is intellectual love of God. Maimonides describes this as the highest form of human existence. It is not emotional fervor, but a profound attachment born from understanding. As the intellect contemplates the wisdom embedded in creation, it becomes drawn toward the source of that wisdom. This love is a state of clarity, reverence, and inner expansion. It brings the soul into harmony with the structure of reality itself. In this state, anxiety becomes small. The mind perceives a truth greater than its immediate fears. The soul feels connected to something beyond the fluctuations of circumstance. Love born of understanding stabilizes the heart more deeply than fear born of imagination can disturb it. The sixth step is integration of body and soul. Maimonides' medical writings remind us that spiritual clarity cannot flourish in a neglected body. Physical imbalance clouds perception, weakens resilience, and disrupts emotional equilibrium. He therefore insists that spiritual life must be embodied. Proper rest, balanced diet, calm breathing, and disciplined habits create the physiological foundation upon which spiritual insight can stand. The human being is an integrated whole, and healing must reach every dimension. The seventh step is the harmonization of thought and action. Maimonides emphasizes that knowledge becomes transformative only when embodied in daily life. Anxiety diminishes not merely through insight, but through the alignment of one's life with that insight. The person who understands moderation must practice moderation. The one who recognizes the power of reason must train reason. The one who sees the unity of existence must act in ways that reflect that unity. Consistency between belief and behavior creates an inner stability that weakens anxiety's influence. These steps form what can be called the spiritual architecture of calm. They guide the human being from scattered perception to unified understanding, from exaggerated fear to grounded clarity, from emotional fragmentation to spiritual coherence. Maimonides offers not a mystical escape, but a path of disciplined elevation, a path where intellect, ethics, and spirituality interlock to create a strong and luminous inner life. This is the essence of the Maimonidean synthesis, the union of reason and devotion. The mind does not abandon the world to seek God, nor does it abandon God to understand the world. It sees both as reflections of one truth. In this unity, the soul finds rest. Anxiety thrives on fragmentation. It diminishes in the presence of wholeness. This is the heart of Maimonides' spiritual vision. It is not a singular technique, but a way of being. A way where the human being becomes more aligned with the structure of existence, more disciplined in thought, more balanced in emotion, more steadfast in virtue, and more connected to the source that gives meaning to all things. In this alignment, the anxious mind becomes a tranquil mind. To apply Maimonides' teachings on anxiety in modern life is to cultivate a way of living that restores proportion, clarity, and alignment to the soul. His guidance is not theoretical. It is a path that weaves through daily habits, ethical decisions, rational discipline, and spiritual awareness. The goal is not to eliminate uncertainty, for that lies beyond human capacity. The goal is to develop a mind capable of meeting uncertainty without collapsing, a heart capable of steadying itself amid turbulence, and a soul capable of remembering its own purpose. The first step in practical application is learning to separate the real from the imagined. When fear arises, the mind must be trained to ask, what is actually happening and what is the product of imagination? This question alone restores reason to its rightful place. It interrupts the chain of exaggerated images that fuel anxiety. Maimonides insists that reason must evaluate every emotional disturbance. When reasoning becomes habitual, the imagination no longer dominates. Anxiety loses momentum. The second step is adopting the path of moderation. The anxious mind tends to swing between extremes, excessive worry or complete avoidance, intense vigilance or total disengagement. Maimonides teaches that balance is achieved through the middle path. One must observe thoughts without surrendering to them, confront concerns without magnifying them, and approach life with steadiness rather than intensity. Each action that avoids extremes gradually strengthens the soul's equilibrium. The third step is the cultivation of ethical habits. Maimonides understood that emotional life is tied to moral life. When actions are impulsive, dishonest, or driven by excess, the soul becomes unsettled. Anxiety finds fertile ground in disordered living. But when one practices integrity, discipline, patience, and compassion, the inner world becomes structured. Ethical behavior creates a foundation of self-respect and stability. A person who trusts their own character becomes less susceptible to internal tremors. The fourth step is the care of the body. For Maimonides, physical well-being is not separate from spiritual strength. A tired, overstimulated, or poorly nourished body diminishes the resilience of the mind. Thus, one must cultivate habits that support inner calm. Sleep must be consistent. Food must be moderate. Movement must be part of daily life. Excess must be avoided in all forms. A balanced body produces a balanced mind. This principle alone can significantly reduce anxiety's influence. The fifth step is the practice of contemplation. Maimonides teaches that the mind becomes calmer when it regularly encounters the order of creation. One may contemplate nature, study its patterns, observe its harmony. Such contemplation expands the perspective of the mind. It replaces the narrow focus of fear with a wider vision of reality. When a person sees themselves within the structure of the world, anxiety diminishes. This practice is not escapism, but a return to truth. The sixth step is the acceptance of human limitation. Anxiety intensifies when the mind insists on controlling what cannot be controlled. Maimonides instructs the soul to release this illusion of omnipotence. Life will never unfold according to our exact expectations. Uncertainty is part of the human condition. When the heart learns to accept this, fear loses its urgency. The mind becomes capable of acting wisely without demanding perfection from the world. The seventh step is the gradual confrontation of fear. Avoidance teaches the mind that danger is everywhere. Confrontation teaches the mind that reality is manageable. Maimonides believed deeply in habituation. Virtue is formed through action. The anxious individual must practice facing small fears intentionally. Over time, this builds courage. The mind learns that it can endure discomfort and still remain grounded. This growing confidence weakens the cycle of anxiety. The eighth step is increasing knowledge. Ignorance breeds fear, while understanding breeds calm. Maimonides invites the individual to study not only spiritual texts, but the workings of the world. Learn how the mind functions. Learn how nature operates. Learn about probability, cause and effect, the structure of emotions. Knowledge reduces the mystery that anxiety depends upon. When understanding expands, fear contracts. The ninth step is the elevation of thought through prayer or meditation grounded in understanding. Maimonides was not a mystic detached from intellect. He believed that the highest form of spiritual practice is contemplation of divine wisdom. Whether one prays, reflects, or meditates, the goal is the same: to align the mind with the order of creation. This alignment produces inner stability. The mind becomes anchored in a truth greater than its immediate concerns. Such practices cultivate a serenity that anxiety cannot easily penetrate. The 10th step is the disciplined redirection of attention. Anxiety often arises from fixation. The mind clings to a fear and repeats it endlessly. Maimonides teaches the individual to redirect thought intentionally. When the mind begins to spiral, shift focus to something constructive. Replace rumination with meaningful activity. Replace passivity with purposeful action. This builds the habit of guiding thought rather than being ruled by it. The 11th step is building a life of consistency. Calm is not created in moments of crisis. It is cultivated through daily habits. Maimonides emphasizes that stability arises from rhythm. Regular study, regular reflection, regular rest, regular practice of virtue. These patterns create a structure in the soul that anxiety struggles to disrupt. The person who lives with consistency carries a quiet interior strength. The 12th step is embracing the unity of existence. Maimonides teaches that fragmentation breeds fear. When a person sees life as disconnected pieces, every uncertainty feels overwhelming. But when one understands that all things are part of a coherent structure, the mind rests. The world becomes less threatening. The soul feels part of something larger, something purposeful. This is not mere belief, but a form of perception cultivated through study and reflection. Ultimately, the practical application of Maimonides' teachings is a way of life. It is not a quick remedy or a sudden transformation. It is a disciplined journey toward clarity, balance, and understanding. Anxiety may still arise, but it loses its authority. Fear may still whisper, but it no longer commands. The mind becomes steady. The heart becomes calm. The soul becomes aligned with the wisdom that permeates creation. Maimonides teaches that human beings are capable of profound inner peace. Not the peace that ignores reality, but the peace that understands it. Not the peace that avoids uncertainty, but the peace that moves through uncertainty with wisdom. Not the peace of denial, but the peace of comprehension. To walk this path is to honor the structure of one's own soul. It is to reclaim the harmony that anxiety disrupts. It is to live with the clarity of reason, the steadiness of virtue, and the light of understanding. This is the practical living cure that Maimonides offers.